And I want to thank Jay and Vince and a bunch of short guys for asking me to come out and talk to you guys. And I hope this is worthwhile. Let's see. Well, what I'm going to talk about today is kind of taking your ideas and your creations and taking them to the next level. Taking them, off of your drawing pad and taking them out and pitching them and getting your ideas realized, because that's something we were very fortunate to do. And I wanted to kind of give you a brief history of how we did it. Some of you that know me know this, and you can go to sleep if you like or whatever. But for some of you that don't, it's kind of interesting to see how one group of people made something happen, and kind of how they did it. But back in 1987, John Davis, my partner at DNA, and I started a company called DNA, oddly enough, and it was just two of us. We started it. We were animation guys, but we really had no business experience at all. Neither one of us really had a business class in college. And we did some of the stupidest things of all time trying to get clients, like, going to the library and getting agency names out of the phone books and just cold calling people, which you kind of had to do. But that's what we did. And over time, we kind of built up to the point where we were doing some commercial work and some industrial work and corporate type videos. But we always had sort of a background in doing independent shorts and doing kind of our own thing. We would do what we had to do during the day, and then instead of spending time with our wives at night, we would stay and work on our own independent little animated films, because we felt like that was a way of investing in ourselves, and it's kind of what we felt like we had to do in order to be creative and also to make something happen. We knew that we wanted to do. We enjoyed doing the commercial work and the other work, but we wanted to try to take it to another level. So that's what we did. We would continue to do these short films. We would just, be sitting around or shooting something on the Oxberry, which is way before computers, and we would just start coming up with ideas. We would make them happen. We would, sit down just like you do with any job and say, okay, we're going to spend this much time on it. We're going to write it, animate it, produce it, take it all the way through. And little by little, we would enter these into film festivals so that other people could see them. Those people would say, hey, you need to talk to these guys and enter into this festival. And we got introduced to a group called Spike and Mike, the Sick and Twisted guys of animation, and they liked some of our stuff. And so a lot of people would go see that freak show that traveled around the country, and people at MTV would attend it, and they would contact us, say, hey, that's kind of cool, and we're getting into animation. And about that time, there was a guy, and I apologize for repeating this story, but it's a fun story. This guy calls up, and he's wanting to learn how to use the animation stand that we were using. And so, we'd help him out, and he's doing these little short films, the same kind of thing, and he's playing in a band at night and doing animation during the day, and he's wants to make these little films. And so we talk to him and tell him how to use the stand, and he's a real nice guy. So we said, well, hey, why don't we've got some work, you can come and work with us. And so, he does, and he continues working on his films, and he's showing us, kind of his process of making animation. And it's insane. I don't even understand this, but instead of taking a recorded track and breaking it down frame by frame, he used a stopwatch and he would time out every word with a stopwatch, and it was all this stuff was pretty much like one shot, for 2 minutes, and it was just the most insane process, but he got it done, and it looked good. And he was in the same Spike and Mike festivals we were in. So one day he calls me and he says, hey, these guys at MTV saw my shorts and they want to make a series out of it, but I don't know that I want to do this anymore. Because on the last short that he produced, he said to be discontinued. He wasn't going to do these anymore. And I said, well, they want to make a series out of it. Well, you don't have to do it all yourself. They have studio people that will actually do the animation for you. And he said, yeah, but I don't know if I want to sell my characters. And he was just very reluctant to do it. And I'm like, this is what everyone dreams of. Are you kidding me? And so he said, okay, well, I'll do it. And then that series of short films turned out to be a series called Beavis and Butthead. And then from that, there was another short film he was working on during the Beavis and Butthead days called Milton that eventually became Office Space. And so, it was just like, how often does this happen? It's incredible, but it's because he invested in himself, and he was a creative guy that just had a passion to make things, and he just made it happen. He didn't have an agent in the beginning. He just went out and did it. And, whether you like Beavis and Butthead or not, it's just amazing to see his story. And so we continued doing what we were doing, and we were still a very small shop, and but we continued, and we made a little short film that was called, and the purpose of it was actually to try to go out and pitch television, because we were starting to do a little bit more with the entertainment industry, and people would call us up and say, hey, can you do some animation like you did for this in our show? And we're like, no. We said yes. And so we did that, and then that led to working on a Saturday morning show that was called The Weird Al Show, and we worked on that for the one season that it was on. And then that led to something else. But then we did this one little thing that's sort of a sizzle reel that we were going to try to take out and pitch, called The Adventures of Johnny Quasar. And we took that and entered it into a festival, and it won some awards, and it got the attention of a guy named Steve Odekirk, who at that time was doing the sequel to Ace Ventura, and he was a writer for In Living Color, and was doing a fair amount of stuff with Jim Carrey, and kind of doing a lot of stuff on his own as well, writing and directing. But having him attached to this project suddenly meant that we could go in and pitch at a different level. So I don't know if Jimmy Neutron would have happened or not had this not happened, but it did, and so it was a really great thing to have happen for us. But so we go into Nickelodeon, and they love it, and they love the idea of doing CG animation, because at the time there wasn't a lot of it being done, except on the feature level, certainly not for television. And they liked the idea of being in business with Steve Odekirk. He's the movie guy, and so it's funny because they're so excited, they can't wait to do it, and then 5 years later it happens, and it's amazing the pace at which things work, when you're going into development, and you're the black hole of the whole legal department. But anyway, that happens, and our relationship with Steve Odekirk worked out in such a way that he was doing stuff for television. He had he had an NBC special that no one in here saw, I'm sure, but it was called SteveOdekirk.com. And so, anyway, it was the lowest rated show, primetime show, I believe, of that year. And part of the reason is that wasn't because it was just a horrible show. It was just that it went up against Princess Di's funeral. So, that didn't help. But the work we did on it, he liked that, and he talked to us about, he gave us a call about doing another project for him. And he calls us up in August, and he says, would you guys be interested in doing a Christmas special? And I have always wanted to do a Christmas special. I never got to do a Christmas commercial for a client or anything, and I'm like just dying to do a Christmas special. Are you kidding? So John's on the phone with him, and I'm just like yes, just tell him yes. I don't care what it is, And he says yes, and he says, okay, well we got to sit down and start writing this, and so I'm like, okay, so next Christmas we're going to be doing this is going to come out. And he said, no, it's this Christmas, and it was August, and we hadn't started writing, we hadn't designed a character. We just said, okay, and we're about no, I mean it was one of those things. We knew it was going to be grueling, but you just do it because this is what you want to do. You make a decision that whatever it takes to do it, you just have to do it. And so we're sitting down, and about that same time, we're doing the Weird Al show, and we're doing this, and there's like 10 of us. And so we're just scrambling like crazy to design characters, and we bring people into model, and it's just 24/7. It's like the animation house that never closes. But it was great because it was us taking the next step and trying to get our name out there as people that can do this stuff, write, direct, and produce in-house, here. And the hardest thing you run into is people just like, you're in Texas? And like, well, yeah, you can do it anywhere, you just have to have a computer. So anyway, we do that, and that's for ABC, and I don't even know how it did, but it was great fun to do it, and but it led to another relationship door opening up, and that was with Matt Groening, and he contacted us about doing another Christmas special. It's like, for years I couldn't do one Christmas special, then I'm doing back-to-back Christmas specials, which was great. But it was for a project called All of the Other Reindeer. And it had a pretty tight turnaround as well. But, we saw our company go from, 8 to 10 people to now we're 15 to 20 people. And then, that did well, and it was nominated for an Emmy, and that was really an exciting moment for us. But all the while, we're still trying to get Jimmy Neutron off the ground and going. And about the time Olive wrapped up, we're sitting around going, well, I hope this happens, because they were so excited back in '95. And so we do this, we finish up Olive, and then we produce a pilot for Nick for the Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, and go through that process, which is a great experience to finally get to do that. And they like the pilot so much, they want to make a feature film out of it. And we're like, we can't do this with 20 people. And so, okay, sure, we'd love to do it. And we grow from like 20 people to 150 people almost overnight, and, have to move out and build out a new space and all that while we're in production. But then, that comes out, and we do a film, and it's successful, and we do a television series for 3 years, and that's successful. And still, all the while, I would keep doing little short films, because, you know, all of you in here are creative people, and you know that sometimes when you have an idea, you've got to make it happen. You can't let it sit inside you. You have to do it. And Jimmy Neutron is going, and it's doing well. And then we get a call from Tom Hanks about doing a feature film for his company and Warner Brothers. Well, actually, it wasn't with Warner Brothers at the time, but of course, no one tells Tom Hanks no. So, we do that, and we go from 150 people to 250 people, and based on the success of Jimmy, while we're working on Ant Bully, I go and I pitch a spin-off series of Jimmy to Nickelodeon, who loves the idea of the spin-off series, and they can't wait to get started on it. And then 5 years later, it premieres on Nickelodeon. And but that's the way the process works. I mean, you go, you create, you pitch it, and then you get rejected and rejected and rejected. And then somebody likes it, but it still takes time, and you just have to try to do what you can to keep the ball moving. And if we hadn't invested in ourselves making those short films, years and years earlier, none of this probably would have happened, because we were just doing service bureau stuff, and you have to make that leap. And over the years, working with all the people that I've had the chance to work with, in DNA and other people outside, it's been a great experience for me. And what I want to do, and I think I have the right disc, and we'll see. But for those of you that do animation, this process. I find this little sequence pretty interesting, because it's interesting to me to see how at every level animation gets better and better. I mean, you start out with boards, and the boards, I mean, for me, I've rarely laughed at storyboards, even doing a comedy show. It's just, and then you go into an animatic, you can see how it works and see if it's going to cut together and get your timings the way you want them. And then you go into layout, which is just stiff characters moving around in a space. And it actually gets funnier to me for some reason, expressionless characters performing lines that they're not even close to doing, but you kind of see it, and it's like, oh, okay, I can see this now. The camera's moving, or your shots are blocked out, and okay. Then you see the first pass of animation, and you're going, oh, now this is really cool. And then you see it lit, and the effects, and the sound design and everything else, and you go, oh my gosh. Every episode that I worked on, directing on the Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, I always went through these 4 phases of glee, watching episodes come together. And it was always amazing to me that I never got used to it. I'd see it and I go, I don't like this episode. This is really going to be bad, and we got to do something. And then you see it in the next stage, and it gets better and gets better and gets better, until at the end it's like, this was a pretty good episode. I'm pretty proud of this. And so hopefully I'm going to try this and see what happens. Let's see. And you'll kind of get to see the process, hopefully. I think this first section, oh, this is it. But this okay, this first section is just a short little demo of the show and scenes from 3 seasons of this series.
If only we could increase our velocity. We can! Use jet shoes! If we can increase our speed, we can jet ahead of a snowball! Kid, you are one smart, kid, not a jet. Batteries are dead. You have to have 27 AA batteries? No, but I might have a better idea. Kids, check him up! The circumference to silver toy is amazing! If only we could increase our velocity. We can! Use jet shoes! If we can increase our speed, we can jet ahead of a snowball! Kid, you are one smart, kid, not a jet. Batteries are dead. You have to have 27 AA batteries? No, but I might have a better idea. Kids, check him up! The circumference to silver toy is amazing! If only we could increase our velocity. We can! Use jet shoes! If we can increase our speed, we can jet ahead of a snowball! Kid, you are one smart, kid, not a jet. Batteries are dead. You have to have 27 AA batteries? No, but I might have a better idea. Kids, catch him up! The circumference to silver toy is amazing! If only we could increase our velocity. We can! Use jet shoes! If we can increase our speed, we can jet ahead of a snowball! Kid, you are one smart, kid, not a jet. Batteries are dead. You have to have 27 AA batteries? No, I might have a better idea.
Anyway, that's kind of the process and what we would go through every episode. And
Can I make a note real quick?
yeah.
All right. So you guys saw the process, right? Okay. Now, typically, where do you turn in your project? Along this process. First pass, maybe, right? Because you sit there and you go, oh, well, I did it, and this much for me, and I go, and you turn that in, right? Did you see the difference in entertainment value between the first pass and the finishing pass? Right? Huge difference, right? I mean, the motion and the sounds and the effects and everything else. That's why I keep telling my classes, if you think you're putting in the work, you're not. Right? How many times did Keith say, hey, he stayed after instead of going home? What did he do? He stayed at work. And did you notice how all these opportunities, he had something to show somebody else? And that's how he got the opportunities? Right? You have to have something to get people's attention. And so if you don't, should be your goal. And Vince, a student show should be an incentive for you to put something together, if nothing else. All right, back to you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I mean it's a good point because you know you do have to animation, as anybody that does it knows, it is an extremely tedious process. And the only reason we could do this show is because we had 150 people all working towards the same goal of making what we felt like was a really great show, especially for its time. I mean, I still look at it and am very proud of all the people that worked on it. And but that's what you kind of you have to do it. I mean, you have to decide, this is what I want to do. I'm going to take the time, and then, I don't know anybody that likes to that works on animation during the day for a living and then says, you know what, instead of doing something else in my spare time, I'm going to do even more animation, because it's it's like, man, I need a break from this, but you can't. You have to sit down and figure, this is what I want to do. I need to take this time in my life and try to make these things happen. And I go back to it, you can invest in a lot of things, but the best thing you can invest in is yourself, and try to make you the best you can be, and try to hone your craft and just learn new techniques, and there's so many pieces, so many facets to go into making an animated, even a short film or whatever it is you're working on. Try to improve your process with that, and that's really about all I have to say on the process. But I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. And sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the transition that I know you were there from the 2D to the 3D transition?
Sure.
And how you were able to break into that field. Because first, we used to be one of the guys in Hollywood that we reported being huge running stuff.
Right. Well, we started out as a 2D house, and little by little we could see the writing on the wall that less and less 2D is being produced, and CG's starting to it's doing some really cool things. I mean, Pixar was doing some amazing things with their short films, so we knew that we needed to make a transition. And a lot of what we do still goes into CG. I mean, you still have to design characters, and you still need, to know the principles of animation, no matter what medium you're using. But, fortunately, my partner John was sort of like the technical overlord of DNA, and he really pushed us to, make a transition into CG. And I remember the very first computer we got was a Mac, and it cost us $30,000 for one computer that runs at the speed of, I mean, it was so slow, it was amazing. And we filled it up with memory. I can't remember what it was. I wish I could remember, because it would be so hysterical to know what we thought was. Yeah. And we thought, we'll never fill this up. There's no way we could do enough work in our lifetime to fill this up. And, a week later, we needed more memory. And, but, we started seeing sort of a change in the traditional 2D hand-drawn techniques. Even before that, we went from the Oxberry to, the digital painting. Pretty early on, because I mean, if no one in this room has painted cells before, you should, because it's a humbling experience. Because you sit down, you get all your drawings the way you want them, then you get to go back and ink them on acetate, and then you get to flip them over, and hopefully you remember to flip them over and paint on the back. Well, we had to redo a lot of cells because somebody, new comes in. Okay, we just want you to paint this stack over here, and they didn't know that you have to flip it over. So you re-ink and then they do it again. But painting on the back, then you wait on them to dry, and then if where you're painting has cats, then cat hair sticks to it, and you've got to pick the cat hair out of it, and then you've got to go shoot it. And that's almost every animation Oxbury cameraman I knew was either an alcoholic or dead. And I'm not kidding you. I don't know how I made it, because there's a lot of times, I wanted to do both at the same time.
Tell me your story about when you were doing the credits. Remember that story?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's always funny to me because, when I was like directing on the series, I'd have animators come to me and they'd say, well, the animation supervisor said you needed this shot redone. This revision is going to take me about an hour to do. And, and I hate to be this way, but I have no sympathy for anything that takes an hour to redo, because what I would do early on is, here's a grandpa story, is I would shoot credits for the end of feature films. And I'll very quickly run you through that process because it's fascinating to me. But you lay out the entire credit roll, and you get your crawl ready, and you tape it down, and it's backlit from the bottom of the stand. And the animation stand is this huge machine that the camera rides up and down, and you can move the surface like north, south, east, west, and it has a platen on it with glass, and you may have seen them like if you went to Disney and went to the Walt Disney's How Animation is Done exhibit and all that. But it's a very lonely world. You're in a black room by yourself, your back to the door, and you're shooting credits, and you have to, and if your credits are 3 minutes long, here's the process is you lift up the glass, you move it one increment, you put down the glass, and you shoot a frame. Okay, that didn't take that long, but you do that about 1,100 times for 1 minute, and if it's a 3-minute song at the end of a film, you're doing that a lot. And so, you just have to get into a rhythm. And so you're doing this and doing that, and you're doing this and doing that. And you're going, and then somebody comes in. I started out working at what's now Post Asylum. It was called Bill Stokes Associates in the day. And Don Stokes, who's a real good friend of mine, came in and says, "Hey, how's it going?" And you're in a rhythm, and if you're doing anything in a rhythm, if anything interrupts that rhythm, you're screwed. So I'm like, "Oh, it's going fine." And then I realized I didn't know if I had just moved it or if I just shot it. And I said, "Do you see if I just moved it or shot?" And he looks at me, panicked, and he runs away. And there's no like Control Z on an animation stand. So what you do is you move all the way back to 0. And honestly, I never cussed growing up until I started running an animation stand. And there's times you just think you're going to lose your mind because you're by yourself and you're the last level of QC on everything. And it's just, I'm glad I did it, I guess, but I don't know why. But it is fun to shoot on film and touching. It's a very different process. I enjoy doing it, but just when you shoot something and then you realize you forgot to open the shutter, and it's like, wow, you don't even know what to do. Or I'll just real quickly, I got to tell you this one story because this is one of my favorite stories of all time. At Stokes was a very old building, been around since the 60s. They shot Bonnie and Clyde there, the Warren Beatty film, some of the insert shots, and way back in the back of this building that looked like an old Spanish galleon. And was the art department in the Oxbury, and at night I could hear rats running across the ceiling, and not just a couple of rats. It was like they were herding them across and taking. It was like night, and they had to go back to their stables, and so we. And it was just creepy because they were those tiles that you knew if you put enough weight on it, it could crash through, and it was like, oh my gosh, and you're back there shooting like this, and it's awful, and all of a sudden I came in and I noticed, I told Don and Bill, hey, we got a lot of rats here, and so they called an exterminator. No rats. It was great. One day I go in, it's in the middle of summer, and I notice the smell that can only be death. I mean, if anyone's ever smelled anything dead, there's only one smell like it. And it's so bad, I can't even go back there. So I tell him, you got to get the exterminator back. I think he forgot one. And he goes up there and he looks through and he says, oh. And that's all he says. And I'm like, and he gets it, and I have such respect for those guys, but he gets it and he takes off. And so the smell is still there and it's getting better, but I have a client coming in and he's shooting a documentary on this guy who his story's unique in that he survived a horrible gas explosion. And there's pictures of him close up that I've got to shoot on the animation stand. And I mean, it's so bad it burned his eyes out, and I'm like zoomed into his face, and I'm like, God, this is probably not the most tasteful thing. I mean, you're really going to use this on his story? And but it's awful. And since we're so close to lunch, I'll go ahead and continue the story. But anyway, I'm shooting with him, and we're I'm laying all this stuff out, and I'm on this close up of this guy's face, full on, looking me in the eyes, and all of a sudden, something whizzes by my head and lands on the platen, and it's the largest maggot I've ever seen. A maggot that, I mean, he's huge. He's like the size of a football. And I mean, he's just like, and I mean, it's just, I'm looking at that, and it doesn't hit me in the head, but it just misses me like that. And I'm like, and my client's like, wow. And I'm like, I clean it up and everything, and it's just one of those days. If I live to be 130, I will always remember that, and I'll look for opportunities like this to tell that story, in like the nursing home. So, but that's part of the process. I mean, you do all these, crazy jobs, and it's a job that when I started back in the early '80s at Stokes, I'm making $4.50 an hour, knowing that I could go to McDonald's and make $4.50 an hour, but I want to do this. This is where my passion is. This is what I want to do. I want to create things, and I want to work with other people that have the same passion, and sharing ideas and collaborating and coming up with cool stuff. I mean, a lot of short films were done during that time. A friend of mine, who's now a board artist on Bob's Burgers out in California for Fox, he and I would do a lot of short films. He would do some. I'd help him with his. He would help me with the ones that I'm doing, and we did that for years because we just wanted to make stuff. So anyway, I don't know. I don't even know if I answered your question. Did I sort of? Okay. Well, yeah. I think I was talking about a Mac, and then it got into maggots, and I don't know. So yeah, that's where all of my. And when you ask me a question, all of my stories end with maggots. So just so you know. Well, I recently wrapped up season 1 of a show called Planet Sheen for Nickelodeon, and right now just developing, new stuff and trying, some of it I'm working with other people, some of it I'm doing on my own, but I'm just trying to, do more stuff. And that's kind of what I'm doing. Yes.
Do you think there's going to be another incarnation of DNA in here yet? Did you get into adventure of that size again?
No. No, I mean, the thing is, the interesting thing about DNA, and I can't even express how much I love my time with DNA. But when DNA was the most fun, and any of you guys that maybe work at studios or have studios, the idea of being responsible financially for 250 people and their families when you're independently owned is pretty frightening. When we were 10 people and we all knew each other and we were all just, I could tell you anything about the first 10 people that I worked with, and it was great fun. It was, we were all focused on, we're going to do that. We all pulled together like we're, bailing water from a sinking ship, but, we were going to make this happen. And everybody cared, and it was awesome. And then the larger you get, you're bringing people from all over the world who may not have the same passion for this particular company that you do, of course, because it's not their company. But it just changes. And no matter how you try to kind of keep that mom and pop vibe about your company, it's hard because you got people that they know that as soon as this project's over, they're out of here. And even maybe before the project's over, because they're going to be looking for work. And, you hope that they're early enough in the process that you don't need them at the very end. But it's funny too because, you're working on a project, and animation, especially feature films, they take years to do. And it's always the same. It's always awful. For the most part, 80% of it's awful because, there's always problems, equipment's not working, or this person's not getting along with this person, or something like that. And it's like, we really just want to make a cool movie. I wish we could all focus on that. But it's hard because things do really go wrong. You can't dismiss it. But I remember, people coming to me and saying, you need to go and tell Warner Brothers we need another year. And that was so, I don't know, it was so fascinating to me that someone said that. I just sat there and let them keep talking and like, well, what do you recommend I tell them? Because tell them that they need to spend another $12 million on this movie? Because I can tell you what they'll say. And they'll say no. So, your option is, you just have to do it. You just have to get it done. And, to touch on a little bit about what Jay's talking about early on when he was up here, if you're in school and you're working on an assignment, and you don't do your best work on your assignment, you may not get an A. You might get a B or a C or lower. If you don't turn it in, you'll get an F. If you don't turn it in when you're out of school and you're a professional, you get fired. And depending on the level you work at, you could also get sued. And that's why people have to carry insurance. And, for large companies when they're working on large projects, things can go wrong. One time during the course of all of the Other Reindeer, John, I'll go and blame it on him because he's not here, but John would always back up everything on the server. We had this server. It was so funny because we thought it was a huge server, and it was like this. It would fit in this, And he went to a movie or something and didn't back up a week's work on Olive, and he did it every Friday like clockwork. Went to a movie, didn't do it. We come back Monday, the server had crashed, and we lost everything. And so there's 20 people going, I've got to redo all my stuff. And yeah, we do. We have to do it. And we don't get an extra week at the end of our deadline. It's just, that's the way it goes. And it's, it happens that way. And you find that The second time around, usually you can do it faster than you did the first time because you've worked out a lot of problems anyway. But it's really disappointing, but it's the way it goes sometimes in production. Yeah.
Can you touch on what's the most consistent mistake you see?
I'm sorry.
The most consistent mistake that you might see a young animator make?
Gosh.
There's so many.
Well, I don't want to sound like that, because there's some really great young animators out there, and they get it. I guess a little bit what Jay was talking about, people that think, and I've seen this firsthand with some people that think that, no, you know what, I'm good. I don't really need to take any constructive criticism, because I feel like, I know what I'm doing, and everybody at every level needs constructive criticism. That's why some of the horrible movies are made, are made because there's no one there to tell them no, or to tell them that, that it happens that way. And I think everybody needs to open themselves up to criticism. Even if you don't agree with it, and even if you have a valid point, like, no, I don't think you're right, and here's why. And that's I can't tell you how great a lesson that is to learn for any animator or would-be director or anything like that. If you can talk to your client like that and not be defensive about it, because there's nothing to be defensive about it. They're not saying you're a bad person. And that's the hardest thing for a lot of people to get over. And not just students. I've worked with other people and other directors who would get so upset that the network had the gall to call them into question. You're questioning my directing? And and you're like trying to pull them off the phone with the network and like, look, you know what? They're paying us. We have to listen. You have to respect the position, whether it's a network or a client that you're doing, a commercial for, or whatever it is. You have to respect their position and at least talk to them and not be defensive about it, because that's the kiss of death. No one will ever work with you again. Not just clients, but other directors won't want to work with you again if you have that attitude. I wouldn't. I don't want to have to. And I've done that before, where you're trying to explain, here's why I had. Yeah, this is why I think we need to make some changes. And you pointed out to them, and I remember having animators tell me that, well, this is just a cable show. And I'm like, you know what? This is a show that took us 5 years to get here. And I don't care what it's on. We always want to set the bar high. And that should be everyone's goal. Is you want to set the bar high for yourself, whether you're writing or animating or doing live action, whatever it is. You always want to do your best work. When you show it, you want to feel like, I'm really proud to show this. And people that I actually had an animator. I'd say, you know what? I think we need to change this on this shot. Blah 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 blah. And they actually told me no. And I was astounded, because it wasn't just one-on-one. No. And so I actually had to take them aside, take them into my office, and explain life in the universe to them, because you don't tell the director no. You say you can express why you feel like maybe you disagree. That's perfectly fine. But just no. And I said, well, because you won't have that opportunity a lot longer to say no if you do that. And it's not trying to bully anybody. It's just, that's an important lesson for them to learn too. You just can't do that. And they didn't do it again. Yes.
I kind of had a question on your perspective of something I think that I've been seeing lately, and since you've been part of this industry for the time you have, and I think you have a unique perspective on it. But I feel like a lot lately that there's been sort of this pushback
towards the realm of like computer graphics, visual effects, CGI, whatever you want to call it, because of things, like Star Wars, where it's just like all green screen and stuff like that. There's movies that just they're all special effects and they have really terrible stories.
Yeah.
They're massive blockbusters and they have lots of money, but especially from a creative perspective, where people are just like, man, I'm sick of CGI and movies and stuff. And you'll hear people come on talk shows and stuff and be like, oh yeah, there's no CGI. We did this all, we did all this stuff ourselves. It's all real explosions. It's all real stuff. Like sort of the vibe that, oh yeah, I want to do claymation. It's like the hardest thing in the world. It takes way longer. It costs more money than CGI, but like to know that, oh, I did all that manually and stuff like that. So do you think that that's a valid observation, that there is this massive pushback? Do you see it going in there?
Well, I mean, I don't know actually how massive it is because they continue to make these big CG films. I was reading on Facebook yesterday and I was just laughing because Disney's coming out with this film, John Carter, which I've never heard of. Huh? It came out this weekend? I thought it was.
It's out this weekend?
I thought it was in early March or something. But when is it? Okay, so they've got a little bit of time, but they spent 200. They say 250, but it's actually I've heard more like 275.
Million?
No. Yes. $275 million.
On a film that we're just now hearing about?
Well, I mean, you guys, obviously some people have heard about it, but yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, they started trailers.
But I think you're spending that much money on a film called John Carter. I mean, it's just like the. Well, I mean,
the problem is,
I don't know any.
Their target audience, which is not 40 plus, right, has never heard anything about this.
I've never. I mean, I apologize because I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of it.
And for those of you that are science fiction guys, I mean, I want to see the science fiction film other than Star Wars. I mean, because this film's going to have to make about $600 million to break even. And I don't see it. I don't see it as a wise investment when, and just going back to what, we did early on. I mean, you could make about 12 Jimmy Neutrons for one of those. And not that it's not going to be a great film, and I'm not comparing the two in any other respect other than budget. But, if you made, 12 of those, I mean, Jimmy made over 100 million worldwide on a little over $25 million investment. And that just seems like a smarter business model to me than making a $275 million film that, if it's lucky, I think will make $275 million. And I don't even see it doing that. I mean, if it'll probably make 100 million, but I don't even know enough about it to be speaking. It just seems like that's just not smart. It kind of goes back to these big, and what is it going to have that I haven't seen already? I mean, you go to these CG big special effects films, and I'm not blown away anymore because I've been exposed. You get desensitized to this stuff. I'd rather see a much simpler film with no special effects for myself, whether it's animated or I mean, I guess being animated is sort of. But I don't care about special effects. I care about stories, and I care about craftsmanship that is not just in my face constantly.
So from that, growing into a market that people are starting to pull away from, like, I'm sick of visual effects.
Well, I don't think that'll ever happen. But I think there's got to be a limit to how much of it is visual effects and how much it is a compelling story about characters we care about.
It's a solid base. A lot of times I see in portfolios, I see sweet portfolios that has, I want to look at the detail of the wires and the columns and the modules, and I see tons of light, it's covering everything, and I take all those lights away and put on wire. And the thing is that it's not built on a good base story,
Mm-hmm.
Like the icing on the cake is the best icing we've ever had. The cake is really good crap. No one can eat fast.
I call it polishing a turd.
Yeah.
If it's a turd and you spend, $100 million polishing that turd, it's still going to be apparent to your general audience that it's a turd. You could spend a lot of money, gold plate that turd, but it's still a turd. Well, you're right. And you know what? And it is worth something in the market, because what happens is the way the movie people work is they assign certain actors to movies, and that no matter who that person is, they like that actor enough that they'll go see the movie anyways, right? But
Which doesn't always work.
It doesn't always work.
And I can attest to that.
Yeah, and here's your question real quick. Everything comes in cycles, right? I say this, I typically wear Hawaiian shirts, right? That's my spring wardrobe, right? Is Hawaiian shirts, and this is a transitional wardrobe, right? Short sleeves, right? But the idea is I'm cool about every 8 years, right? I just keep wearing my Hawaiian shirts, and then about every 8 years it comes back in fashion, and then I'm cool again for about 4 months, and then it goes away.
Let's not jump to conclusions.
Okay, well there you go. But the idea is, this trend happened in the 70s. There was a resurgence towards in-film visual effects and everything else, and you had, George Lucas's, what was his first student film that he did? The one THX, whatever, right? And it was all this in-camera visual effects stuff, and there was all these filmmakers in the 70s that had this, let's do it in camera, let's do it right like this. And then you have transition and people go, yeah, this is cool, but what if we could do things that we can't do in camera? Like with Scott Gordon, who we're talking to potentially talk with Keith on this other thing, he created an effect in Where Dreams May Come, where heaven was an oil painting, and Robin Williams was walking through the painting, and as he walked in the flower, it turned to paint, right, and smush. That's absolutely, as far as I'm aware, impossible in live action, right? You're just not going to be able to do that. But through CG, it was a beautiful, amazing effect. He's sliding down this painting into heaven because the world is an oil painting. That's beautiful. What happens is producers tend to get ideas in their head, and this happened with 2D animation. They said, 2D isn't making money anymore. 2D sucks. So we're not interested in anything 2D. But the problem was just what Keith was saying, it's story. The story sucked. If you had a really good story and you make it a CG or 2D or 3D, it has a chance of being good. And that's why Pixar has been so successful.
I think we have more problem than that, because you can look right now, if you go out and make a vampire flick for $50,000, if it's got a cheap budget like that, it'll still make money on Netflix and things of that nature.
Sure.
It's when the budget starts going higher, then you wonder, are you going to make money? Right now, what the only thing are is at this point in time, as far as I can see, is not necessarily oversaturation, although you only have so many first-person shooter games and stuff like that, competitive. But I think that you also start having the fact that most visual effects houses right now have a 5% profit margin, and they're being squeezed everything. So what they're doing is, everything's being done on a cheaper budget. Finally, at some point in time, especially when more than $60,000 to $70,000 student loan is going to start going, why am I getting into this industry? When you work with the minimum wage, when you work with the minimum wage and you wouldn't say now there's no benefits and stuff like that, I think that once you get to the experience of Scott Ford, so unless your supervisor making that kind of money, they're going to lose that middle ground. I think we're going to get all the people with some kind of industry who actually want family and life and something are going to leave the industry, and we're going to have a producers going to find that the prices are going up, we can take it out of stage, or we're not going to do visual effects movies anymore. We're going to start doing like TV right now. Everybody's doing reality. Why? It's cheaper. You don't have to do you don't have to pay for as many things. You don't have to pay for superstars.
It's not that, because you were just saying that you got the Christmas special and you knew it was going to kill you, but you did it because you loved doing it. And I might have my big bill from starting to do a lot of debt, but I want to do this stuff because I love doing it. And I
Mhm.
suppose it doesn't
You
get
can remain. You
Yeah,
can remain
yeah,
continued.
with the crowd that comes out.
It happened in the 70s with 2D animation. The majority of 2D houses went away. They went, Disney stayed, Warner Brothers, I think, stayed for a little bit, Hanna-Barbera stayed for a little bit, but over time, what they did is they started outsourcing animation. Now, if you guys do the superhero flicks, right, the Justice League and all those guys, look at the studios where all that animation is done. It's not here. The creative is done here, the writing's done here, the voiceover is done here, but in terms of, and even layout and some original design and maybe orchestra stuff is done here, but all the animation is done overseas. And that is going to happen with 3D animation. That is going to happen. That's already happening with visual effects. Now, here's the cool thing. You can be the guy that comes up with a character, that comes up with an idea, that is part of the creative team. That's the one asset that America still, to this day, does better than almost every other country on the planet, is come up with really good ideas, right? And a lot of those really good ideas translate into toys and lunch boxes and stuff like that. Now, the deal you have to make is make sure you got a really good deal on franchise. Right? Right? Now, maybe Keith could talk a little bit about that because this is kind of lessons of things you learned, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. When you, especially the first time out, when you're going and you're basically selling your baby, to the studios. I mean, you are going to get some back end. Well, funny thing. To everyone else except me. Funny thing about something like a film like Jimmy Neutron that obviously made money. I mean, it made 103. It cost 25 to 30. 103 minus works out to where there's some money there somewhere. You're never sure how the studio packages films, and so there's some cross collateralization and it's, they couldn't wait to do a Jimmy Neutron 2, Paramount. Couldn't wait to do it. Had people down here, accounting and things, and we just couldn't agree on what the sequel was going to be. And that's a funny story too, because let me finish this story though first. The thing is, so if it made money enough, but they always showed a loss. They would send us accounting statements. It was always in the red, which is impossible. Or everything I learned in school is wrong, because it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so we never saw, and I'm serious, 1 penny from the Jimmy Neutron movie. However, when it became a television series, because we had, a back-end deal with that, we actually did see money from that. And even to this day, we still see some money from that. It's not what it was back in 2002 or 2003, but it was, and when you have a company, one of the reasons, that kind of makes me think, I don't know if I want to do a company again, is that you get these big back-end checks and they go right into the company. And you're thinking, well, I've got a wallet. But it all goes into the company because the first season of the Jimmy Neutron series, we lost money. The second season of Jimmy Neutron, we broke even. The third season of Jimmy Neutron, we made the money we lost in the first season. So overall, I mean, we made some money off of Jimmy Neutron, but when you have a company, we did this feature film, and all the animators said, we can't use the software for the pipeline of a television series. We need Maya. Okay, well, there goes all that money. And so, all my, producer fees and back-end money and John's too, that's gone because we have to get, 30 seats of Maya. And so, it's just the way it goes. I mean, it is cheaper. I mean, everything is cheaper nowadays. I mean, but it's also more competitive. I mean, we were one of the few places at that time to do this type of, large, and we ramped up for it. but it's in the whole movie industry is very fascinating to me because it just doesn't make any sense. And I forgot what my other point
Your other
was.
story was the Jimmy Neutron too. You said they talked about.
Well, yeah, I mean oh yes, okay, now I remember. We would go, and it's so funny because you have this image in your mind of what studio executives are like, and how they're just always running around with two phones and talking and doing stuff, and it's nothing like that. And we would go and we would pitch, okay, here's an idea for Jimmy Neutron 2, and it's so funny because there was one executive there that we would pitch to her, and she would just have her head on the table the entire time. And
What do you mean by like not looking up?
well, I mean, she's like this the entire pitch. And it's like, we flew in from here to Paramount just to meet with her, and she would respond to us like this. No, I don't like that. And then we'd try something else. You know what? I like that if you put it with that. But it was all with her face in the table. Really? And no, as it turns out, she had a headache. And but it's like, well, maybe we should reschedule this for another time. No, pitch it to me. And it's like, well, there's no way this is going to go well. I mean, she's got a migraine, and she's on the verge of throwing up on us, and so it's like, well, we know this is going to just be greenlit immediately.
Right.
So, but it's just it's funny because you just think that, and after you have screenings of, I remember going to screenings after films, and you'd meet with the head of the studio, and they'd tell you everything that's wrong with your film and why it's not working, and this one would chime in with exactly the same thing, and this one would chime in with exactly the same thing that one said to that, and it's really funny. I mean, it really is like, I mean, that part of it is like what you imagine it's like. Just people, oh, you're absolutely right. Oh, yes, and you're right about what they said. And but sometimes you do really get really good feedback, so you have to sit there and take it, which goes back to my other talking point, is that just sit there and I mean, I got hammered on every episode of Jimmy and everything I ever did, to the point, I mean, I remember just thinking I was probably the world's worst animation director early on, because I would get pages of notes, and you just look at it and you think, oh my God, I'm in the wrong business. It took me this long to realize my mom was right. I should have been a dentist. I mean, it was true. I mean, and then so what I did was I sat with that guy over there in the what color is that, John? Burgundy shirt. And we sat down and we figured out, because my background was mostly 2D. So when you move into 3D, there's a whole new set of director rules that you really need to be aware of. And so John and I would sit and we'd spend time, again, making that investment in ourselves to be better filmmakers. And it's like, well, gosh, we just came off an Oscar, and we're so good, and why? How dare they talk to us that way? But it's like, okay, I want to be good. I want to be thought of as a good director, and I want to make a good show so that we can continue to make this show more than 6 episodes, because I've been through that. And we did. We figured it out. We sat down and we figured out camera language and film language, and how to set up shots better and how to shoot. I mean, it's funny to me because some people don't think the camera, for some reason, is that important like if you're doing a comedy, and which is funny to me, and but everything's important. I mean, how you shoot comedy is far different than how you shoot action adventure. I mean, but some people, it's hard for them to understand that. I mean, that's why comedies are generally shot the way they're shot. It's because it works. We want to see characters interact and be funny. We don't want to be constantly aware of the camera moving around them all the time because it's distracting and it kind of takes me out of their moment and puts me into a moment where I'm going, oh, hey, the camera's moving. And so, again, I don't know if I've answered anybody's question, but I get off on these tangents.
No,
And
what you're doing though is you're giving good information because I mean I just said that. Who's in my class? Who's here for my Wednesday class? Anybody here? All right. What did I say about the camera in CG for bonus extra credit? What did I say?
well, apparently she didn't get the
No,
bonus
what?
extra
Say it
credit.
again. Don't move it around everywhere. Why not? It's confusing. And for all you, it's Cloverfield. People are throwing up in the theater. Right? I mean, and here's the deal. All you guys play first-person shooters, and you're moving the camera all around, because that's where you're thinking, and now you're thinking that's how you're supposed to do animation. Right? And in real storytelling, a lot of times the camera just sits there at the right angle, showing the right stuff, and it doesn't move until you cut.
Plus you can run this background once.
Yeah, which is nice.
TV show, it's very cool.
Yeah.
Cloverfield actually just great for shot like normal, but they did the shaky cam to make more of it.
Ah.
So I mean, that's what I heard. I was like, you need to.
Yeah, I mean, why? I mean, I can't imagine that the other version isn't more watchable.
Well, I guess they would have made it feel like he was part of the action, like the guy was really running around New York, and I was like, oh, let's just pretend to get a really good.
Well, I've been in films like that though. I haven't seen that particular film, but I've been in films with that handheld thing, and I can't watch them because I really do get motion sickness, and I just have to just sit like this and sort of listen to the movie. It's kind of like going as a blind person. Yes.
How many 3D modelers did you have in making Jimmy Neutron? And when you had them, did you lay them off after they were done with all the modeling, or did you convert them into like the animators too?
Wow. Let me try to remember that. I mean, we had a number of modelers. I can't remember the exact number, but we had quite a few, and they were all just incredible. I mean, just wow. Great. And some of them, may have wanted to move into animation. And if anybody did, we would give them a chance. I mean, we had layout guys that wanted to move into animation, and we would try it. And, as a director, sometimes you've got to know your team pretty well and know, well, this particular animator is good at this type of animation. This animator is a great performance guy. So I've got this one shot. And you tell your animation supervisor, you got to give this person this shot. Please give them this shot because I want that performance, and I know they'll nail it first time. Because in television, you have like a 10% redo factor working with you, and if you do any more than that, people start fussing at you, and which is fine because I mean it's doing a television series. The first season is truly hellish. I mean, John can attest to that. I mean, it's awful. But if you make it through it, and that's where the war of attrition comes into effect, if you make it through it, the second season is better. I mean, I would have meetings with people, with animators, and John can attest to this too, that, animators just complaining to me about this show's too hard, this show's too hard, this show's too hard. And, I just keep saying, well, I know it's going to get better. The first season is always awful. I mean, I've talked to other producer friends of mine that said, yeah, the first season's hell. It just is. Because you're ramping up on everything. You're discovering everything in the first season. If you get another season, you'll be fine. And the second season came around, and it was. It was much better. People weren't staying as late. And by the third season, people were complaining to me that they weren't working enough. And I'm like, you're the same guy that came to me 2 seasons ago and said you can't see your family and you're doing all this. And now we got it to the point where, I mean, it's literally like working at a bank. I mean, you come in at 9, you go home at 5 or 6. I mean, a lot of guys did that. They really had their process down so well. I mean, like Ray over at Real Effects, he was one of those guys that, I mean, he'd come in and he'd leave and he would have everything done. And he never had to stay late, ever.
Amazing team. You really did.
And Paul Allen was that way. He'd do the same thing. I mean, yeah.
Tons of amazing balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we had like, and a lot of these people have gone on to Pixar and DreamWorks, and they're scattered all over and doing great stuff at high levels at those places. I mean, it was really kind of like, you know, being a part of a super group back in the 60s, and then all those, you know, the bass player from the band went off and they formed this, and the drummer went off and did this, and, you know, it was really a great group of folks that, you know, you just go, wow, what a cool moment in time.
I have an off-the-cuff question.
Mm-hmm.
Many people here may have not seen them. Did Nickelodeon ever see Man and Puss before they signed on to Jimmy Neutron? Do you put that on your reel?
No. Now, you know, I don't.
Keith and I had, you know, they did it, for those of you that don't know, Keith did a series called Man and Puss for fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was essentially for fun. That was my first exposure to Keith, actually, as an animator, was Man and Puss, because at LSG Animation, which is now defunct, I started there, and Roman Fluke comes and goes, man, you got to check out this animation. And I go, okay. And they're very, it's an adult, right? It's more adult, Spike and Mike kind of twisted stuff, and Keith came up with these characters, and they're awesome. And I love them. I think, but we did a show recently where we did a whole series of shorts that Keith put together, and I got down and I said, honestly, and this is what Keith and I are friends, and I said, if you want to be remembered, don't do this.
To which I said,
which you said, go ahead,
is, well, you know, and I'll tell that to Seth MacFarlane and to Matt Groening and all the other adult animators out there, Mike Judge. I mean, just do good work. My feeling is, and I see what Jay's alluding to, is that you don't want to be known, I guess, you know, for doing, because it does sort of. I mean, I have had to sort of battle that. I mean, there's certain Nana and Little Puss Puss cartoons I wish I hadn't done, to be honest with you. I mean, those were 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, and, you know, the way you look at life at that point in your life and the way you look at it after you've had a couple of kids, well, they know who they are. In fact, you know, I'm still working with them. I've had puppets made of them, and I still work with them, and my daughter, who's 14, helps me do stuff. She'll do photography and stuff, you know, shoot the puppets for me, and they know who they are. I don't show them to them because, I mean, but my son's 18 years old, and so, you know, he watches Family Guy, and he knows, you know, all those shows and The Simpsons, and you know, so it's not like, I don't think Nana and Little Puss Puss are going to scar him, really, but, you know, for their day, I mean, they were one of the early, you know, sick and twisted, you know, little comic duos, you know.
I think, to be fair, and kind of come up with a fair thing, is this: we're all a little sick and twisted, all right? And if you're honest with yourself, you know that deep dark place.
Actually,
you want to do dark
Jay,
stuff, right?
John Price is not.
Oh, okay, John is not. Okay, with the exception of John, right? I think most of us, I'll say this, a lot of us in this room have that little dark place that we sometimes entertain the idea of, what if I did an animation where I could just squish the button, right? Or something like that. Julie, you were my director class. Do you mind if I pick on you a little bit? She did an animation of a monkey throwing poop at the spring. Do you remember that? And I gave you an A for that. right? And I said, this is really fun. You wanted to do a monkey throwing hoop, so not a problem. I did. But I said, you might or might not want to show this as you're going out to get to work. Because if you go to a faith-based, Christian-based company and you show monkey throwing poop, I don't know what the reaction is going to be.
You keep that off your stuff, that.
Yeah, keep it off that reel. So I think do what you love and you're going to get better, but realize that there is this kind of mainstream thing that you're going to be remembered for, and it's probably not going to be those films. It's probably going to be the Jimmy Neutron as opposed to Nan Plus Plus. In the long run, that's what I'm saying is I think you should still do them, but if you're going to be remembered, it's probably going to be the mainstream stuff that you'll be most remembered for, not your stuff you do for yourself. But the stuff you do for yourself is what will get you to the mainstream.
That's what happened for us. I mean, it was those films that Vince brought up. That's what led to a show called AJ's Time Travels, and that's what led to the Weird Al show. I mean, Weird Al, who's actually not as weird as his name alludes to, he knew of him, and his manager, I kind of designed. We did some shorts within the body of Weird Al's show. It was very much like a Pee-wee's Playhouse show, but with Al instead of Pee-wee. And we did these shorts called The Adventures of Fat Man. And I based them on designs that, in the same Nana and Little Puss Puss universe. And, I mean, he just like out of the blue said, hey, that looks a lot like Nana and Little Puss Puss. And I said, well, yeah, that's because we did that. And, oh, okay. And, that did lead to other things. And then, but, it's not always remembered as what got you here because there's other forks in the road that you take. But, that's how we John and I would sometimes be shooting on the animation stand, and this is a true story. We had Celtic music on. It was like 2 a.m, because when you're shooting on film, you never finish anything until 2 a.m. I don't know why it is. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be, okay, I just need to shoot a lock off on this. Okay, we're going to start first thing in the morning, and we're going to be done. And then 2 a.m. rolls around, and you're done. And you're always calling the lab and saying, hey, can you wait? We're on our way. Of course, you're not really on your way. You've got to finish up. But we're on our way. Just hold it, because they would process the film and everything. And so he had some Celtic music on, and we started doing stupid voices, and we started making up this story about a little woodland cherub. And it became sort of this really idiotic idea, and we made a film about it because it was so stupid, and it made us laugh so hard that we just got to do this, and we did. We had some downtime after finishing this job, and we just knocked it out real fast and got it in a festival, and people say, hey, do you have a copy of that film? And I don't know where it is, but it leads to things. Little things lead to other things, and that's kind of the journey that you go on.
Yeah, so I guess the basic thing is do something.
Yeah, and finish it. I can't tell you how many times. Oh my gosh, I've had people, I can't even count them, how many times people have come up to me and say, I've got this idea for a film. It's, like 5 to 10 minutes, and I stop them there. Because there's a huge difference between 5 minutes and 10 minutes.
Sure.
One is twice as long as the other. And if you've never done 5 minutes of animation before, even if you have some help, it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. And especially if you're doing it for nothing, just because you just want to do it. So, I always recommend, why don't you start with, tell me what your story is, and let's see if we can tell it in 30 seconds. And because what happens is people don't finish. They have a great idea and they get all excited about it, and something else comes up, life happens, and they don't finish their projects. And it's because the goal of making that 5 to 10 minute film is impossible under their current situation. I mean, the reason we did so many Nana and Puss Puss films is because we had downtime, and I had Paul with me, and he and I would just, okay, we just finished this project for TGI Fridays or Mary Kay or somebody. We've got a couple weeks before this starts. Let's knock out one of these. And we'd write it, lay it out. And that's why, another reason they're so simple too is because we just, by design, it's like, okay, we want to tell this joke in 2 minutes, and we had everything there too. We could record, we could, lay it off, and we could do everything that we needed to do to make a finished film. And when you don't have all that equipment, that makes it even much more difficult. So, but the thing is, if you're going to start something, always finish it. Just see it through, even if it's not good. If you're not happy with the way it turns out, at least finish it.
Yeah, I guess, one of the realizations too that you mentioned here is, and I keep wondering as an instructor and adjunct professor here, is this idea that students wait till the last minute before they turn in their assignments, and it's crap, and they think that as professors we don't know what you did, and we do know what you do. And I think the real danger is that becomes your life habit. The real danger is you just get used to waiting till the last minute or not getting your skills to the point that you can really do quality work, and you're always turning in stuff that people are recognizing as mediocre at best. And I don't think anybody in here wants to be mediocre, but it's somehow finding something inside of you to say, yeah, I'm going to stay up an extra hour, or I'm going to get started on it sooner, and I'm going to actually put something out there that has value. And it's not because I'm doing an assignment for class. And I tell that to my students, you're not doing assignments for me. And a lot of times students have that perspective, oh, I'm doing this assignment for Jay, or I'm doing this assignment for Keith. And it's not for us, it's for you. You're doing the assignment for you, and if you don't have that perspective, you're going to keep turning in crap. And you're going to keep thinking, oh, when I graduate, then I'll have time to do real quality work. And when you graduate, you actually have less time. Because when you get on the real world, it's harder to find that time to do stuff.
Yeah, it is hard. I have to say though, the last minute is a great inspiration for me too, because I'll find that I like to think about what I'm going to do for a long time, and then I don't know what it is about me, and I wish I wasn't this way because I have friends that are very diligent. But if I know I'm faced with a looming deadline, man, I can just knock it out. But it's got to be looming.
Right.
And I don't know. I wish I wasn't that way. I mean, it's kind of what you're talking about, and I'm ruining your point. But honestly, I wish I wasn't that way. I mean, but I do my best work under pressure. Like I have either a writing assignment or I'll have something. And I don't always work that way, but I find that, I can knock it out because the thought of not doing it is not even in there. I mean, I can't not do it. So, but I'll wait and I'll just, either it's writing something or looking at shots or, whatever it is.
Here's the danger.
The structure
that,
is good.
I gotta counterpoint for a second.
No, I agree with you. Yeah,
as a business guy, if you wait to the last minute all the time, something is going to go wrong with your computer.
It is. Well, something's going to go wrong. I mean, it's that 2 a.m. thing. Something's going to go wrong anyway.
Right. And then if you don't turn in your assignment like you're supposed to, not only are you probably not going to get hired, but then you could get sued.
By Jay.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but go ahead. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, more questions, I guess.
What? Yes. I don't know if it's that or honestly it's some form of ADD or something. I'm really Thank you for laughing at me. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Brothers in ABD.
No, I mean, but do you know what I mean? I mean, sometimes, it's just like, even if I'm writing, it's like I'll write something and I've got to make myself write crap in order to have something down so I can go back later and fix it, which is kind of a weird process, but I'll do it just so I have some sort of foundation to work off of, and then I can get away from it, think about it, go, do something, and then come back and have a fresh perspective. But, I don't always do it that way. It depends on what the task is. Like if it's shot approval, I'll just sit down and do it because there's nothing overly creative about making sure these shots work together or the lighting. I mean, it's creative, but it's not the same kind of I've got to think of this out of my head creative. So that's a different discipline for me. But if it's something, like writing or designing characters or sometimes I'll just have to think about it for a long time. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I got to turn that in 30 minutes. And, I'll do it. And then knowing I'm going to get notes anyway. And then, so, you just get used to it. But there you go.
You got a question over there?
Yes, sir.
One of the things that you guys allow for the everybody seems to be wired.
Mm-hmm.
There's some animators that not
Yeah, yeah.
and because they, Johnny Keith, they are going to define themselves and they were that was very unique approaching that.
Well, yeah. I mean, my feeling is as long as you get your work done, and in any department, as long as it doesn't hold up another department, as long as you get your work done on time, I don't really care when you came in. I mean, come in whenever, but if I need to find you, I mean, if we have a meeting or something, then, well, of course, you're going to have to be there for that, and you might as well stay. But yeah, some people, they inspiration hits them at different times, and you want to be able to nurture that and quite honestly take advantage of their creativity. So, we try to keep it pretty flexible, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because some people will abuse it. But those that don't, I think, really flourished. So, yes. Uh-huh. No, actually, it was done at Nickelodeon by staff writers. There were 3 staff writers, and so as a director, you're not battling the writing because I would never say something, oh, that's not a funny episode or anything like that. We would just we would get it, and I would sit down with my department heads and I'd say, how can we plus this? How can we, if it's not doesn't seem very funny, how can we make it funnier? What are some things we can bring, to the game to make this a better episode? And you don't want to have a camp of them against us ever, because nothing good comes from that, because everybody's trying to make a great show. They're not trying to make their great show, and we're not trying to make our great show. But inevitably there's going to be things that do I have time to tell one more story? I'll tell it really fast. It was dealing with writers, because I'd get notes, and honestly, I'm not kidding you. I had this told to me, and I'm quoting him. I'd get notes from writers, and I'd say, why are you sending, this is a great episode. Why are you sending that note on that particular thing? I mean, it was like minutia, like a character's running in his eye direction. If you pause, I'm not kidding. They paused it and it said his eye direction looks wrong. But he's running, he's a blur across screen. You couldn't see his eyes. So I said, why are you giving me that note? And he said, because I have to give you 12 notes. And I hung up. No, I didn't. But I mean, do you remember that? I have to give you 12 notes. And I said, well, then can you make them good notes? Because I'll be happy to do as much as we can. But I mean, we had a relationship where I could say stuff like that to them, and they would, and they're funny. They're funnier guys than me, so they'd always get the last word. And But you know, that wasn't a good note. I mean, I'll be happy to do as much as we can, but sometimes it get to the point where I would do things like we did an episode called Flippy, which is about a ventriloquist dummy. Jimmy Neutron's dad wants to become a ventriloquist and all this stuff. And I got a lot of notes. And so what I did, because I knew how anal this guy was, on my reply to all his notes, I changed Flippy to Floppy. And he was so upset by the fact he misspelled it, because he'd say, well, in this shot we need to have Floppy do this, and I was like, isn't this episode called Flippy? Did something change? Do we need to change the title? And then he'd say something else about Floppy, and then like, okay, this is a great note, but tell me, when do we start calling him Floppy? You're going to have to go back and re-record everybody's dialogue, and I just started doing that with him. And he was so upset that he misspelled, because he was, like I said, he was a very anal guy, and all of his emails were perfectly typed, perfect grammar. He was so upset he didn't ask me to do any of the notes. I mean, he kind of stopped there, and he just stopped down. He said, "I'm so sorry. I can't believe I kept that from 2005 or something. I still have that on my computer because it's such a great." I thought he would say, "Hey, I didn't do that," but he didn't understand you can change somebody's email that way. And it was subtle enough that he thought he did it, and to this day, I never told him that he. I probably should have. Can I just tell one last story? I promise, and I'll make this quick, because this is one I wanted to tell when, and John will remember this too, but, and John Price, by the way, was the editor on, Jimmy Neutron, the film and the television series, and the Ant Bully, and, lots of stuff. But anyway, Rob Paulson, who was the voice of Carl on Jimmy Neutron, came to our office. Great guy. One of the nicest people you will ever meet, ever, in any industry, but by far the nicest guy I ever met in the film industry. Just super great guy. Well, he came, he wanted to visit us. And so I said, could you do me a favor? Because I think we just finished season 1 and we were going into season 2. And people were just starting to catch their breath. And I thought I had the great idea of saying, hey, could you pretend you're a network executive and tell them we're going to have to kick it up a notch? After everybody had just about killed me on season 1. So he has sunglasses, and he's a great character actor. And so he gets in there, and we introduce him. I can't remember how we introduced him, but nobody knew who he was. And he's talking, and he's the new executive taking over for this old executive that was fired or whatever. And he's talking about, hey, you guys, it's a packed place. And I'm standing behind him, and our line producer's next to me, and he goes off and he starts talking about, you guys did a great job, but we need to knock it up a notch. I mean, we need to have more action, more effects, more this, more that. And everybody in the entire company is looking, and they're just appalled at what they're hearing, because they think this is, a new mandate down from Nickelodeon. And it's what he said. This is what we got to start doing. We got to kick it up a notch. And you guys are going to have to work harder and put in more time and do all this. And he was just blasting them. And I'm sitting back knowing that, I was very thankful that there were no handguns in the office, but that I knew of. And so he wrapped it up with saying something, and I can't ever do Carl's voice, but he said something like, and the most important thing is we need to do more episodes featuring Carl, in Carl's voice, and everybody lost it. I mean, some people, I think, fainted, but it's probably the worst thing I ever did to everybody. But
remember the dark side of it?
But Rob was so great at it, and then what's so great about him? He does something like this where he just tortures these people for about 20 minutes. And then he goes to children's hospitals and visits kids, terminally ill kids, and And it's like, well, there's balance. There's balance in our lives. That's what it's all about. So, yes.
What can a CG artist do to try to set themselves up to have a long-term successful career?
What do they do? What can they? I would just recommend do it every day. Get better every day. Do something that makes you a better artist every day. And one of the hard things for artists to do is to promote themselves. It's hard for me, to sell and just go out and sell myself and to introduce myself to other people doing the same thing you're doing. But you got to do it. You got to try to get better all the time and get out there and meet people. And because you never know where that'll take you.
Okay, I gotta make sure I'm actually being a decent teacher. How do you get good at something?
You know what's funny? His kids do the same thing. I was at his house and his kids say the same thing.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
It is.
Listen, I tell my own kids, I go, how do you get good at something? And I told this story, right? I'll tell this real quick. My son was playing video games. This is how it started. My son was playing video games on the Wii. And he couldn't get past the level. He couldn't get past the level. I forget what the mechanism. But he couldn't get his Mario, and he couldn't get past the level. So he's like, literally crying, right? He's about 3 years old. He's crying, and he's saying, I can't get this, Dad. What are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know what that to do, man. I don't play Mario like this. And he goes, I said, son, here's how you get good at something. Practice. And he goes, and then he just kept doing it, right? And I told him, he needs to practice. So then he's practicing, and then he finally gets back. He goes, Dad, I did it! And I go, what did you do? How do you get good at something? He goes, practice. Same thing, my daughter, everything. What it teaches you is this. In life, you will confront obstacles. You will confront problems. You will confront things that you don't know how you're going to get past this. One of my other friends says, I can't wait till Monday to see how I figure this thing out. Right? But if you have in your mind that the way that you get through this is to continue to move forward and continue to practice, you will get through it. You will get through it. Or you're dead. Right? Those are the things. But many, many adults give up after trying something twice. They will try things 2 times, and if they can't get it after 2 times, they never pick it up again. And little kids will try it when they're learning how to walk again and again and again and again until they learn how to walk. And we lose that as we grow up. We lose it. And I think everything that Keith has said and everything that Brett said and Vince has said, it's about keep going. And it's about doing your best. And anyway. And let's thank you for Brett, did you have something you wanted to say?